Welcome to Create a Cast with your host, David Welch. Today's show is literally going to be a discussion on where you can find some readers, and where readers are. Now, the last couple of days I've been packing up stuff to move to Arizona, and the driver for the moving truck is a consummate reader. I mean, the guy spends a lot of time in the truck, and whatever free time he does have, he spends reading. So it was a great opportunity for me as an author to say, hey, let me give you some titles of some, you know, uh, authors that need a readership. And he was down for reading pretty much anything. I mean, he enjoys the more of the Jack Reacher type of stories, but he was, open for different readership. So I was definitely introducing my book, Hell's Waiting Room and Other Stories. And then after that, I sent him a list of some historical fiction authors as well as some of those kind of mystery type government authors that I know of well as well. So that's what I did. I mean, and you have to think how many truck drivers are out there on the road right now. They're either listening to books on tape, which if you are an author and you don't have your book on tape, I recommend you pay the extra money or at least get your publisher to ensure that it happens. Because books on tape are few and far between, and it seems to only be the major titles. Whereas if you can get your title out there, it opens you up to a whole new world of readership or audioship. And that'd be the best thing for you as a writer to get out there and have people experience your writing in a format or a medium that they have readily available to them. Not everybody has the ability to sit down for 20, 30 minutes, an hour to consume a book. Even though, sorry about that, the author I did meet was, or not the author, the reader I did meet, the driver, was definitely was a reader that likes the weight and the feel of a book in his hand. So I'm just a little bit tired. The last 2 days have been really taxing, guys, on my body and mind, but yet we're here. So I would encourage you as writers to seek out those who can do a good reading of your novel, good reading of your book, whether it's poetry, play, whatever have you, and then get it out there in the audible format, or at least a auditory format for people to listen to. Same thing with podcasts. If you're a writer and you already write a blog and you already like having a certain format to your blog, and you have your novels, you have your books, you have all sorts of different things that you're working on, why not add a podcast? And I do this with all sincerity and love. I mean, yeah, it's going to give me competition, but think about it. Another medium of creativity for you could be radio. And it's as simple as downloading the app on your phone. And then, next thing you know, you have your own show, you have your own syndication, you can make t-shirts and all sorts of gear about your podcast, and it's just another medium for which you to get out there and voice your thoughts. Now, can you have feedback to your podcast that's both positive and negative? Absolutely. I've had some negative feedback about my podcast. Some of the negative feedback about my podcast, oh damn, you had to listen to your kids every 2 minutes, or you got a lot of distractions, and you got it just my show's mobile, so it's where it's tough. Right now I'm doing my show in my kitchen, and fortunately I have my computer hooked up because I don't have anything else at all. I got no chairs, no dining room table, no dining room, nothing. And at the time, at this current moment, hopefully it stays that way for a little while, my kids are asleep, so is my wife. They're taking an afternoon siesta. So this gives me an opportunity to do one of two things. Yes, it gives me an opportunity to do my podcast. It also gives me an opportunity to do a little bit of writing, a little bit of reading, catch up on email, catch up on some video content that I like on YouTube, and it's been splendid. It's been a great experience for the last about an hour and a half. Good hour and a half I've had on, so it's pretty good. But just think about it, guys. Just add another medium, add something to your resume, add something to your repertoire. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And I would encourage everybody to do as much as they can in this time because you got to look at the time we're living in. We now live in a time where your voice, your words, your stories, your reality can affect others as far away as anywhere. I mean, there's probably someone sitting on a ship right now listening to my Creative Cast episode 1, 2, 3, whatever have you. And they're thoroughly enjoying it. They're like, okay, well, where's more? Then they, research me, get into my stuff, and that's how it happens. If they're on a ship and they waited 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour to download 5 minutes of my show, then that's how dedicated they are to the show. Now, I'm not saying that happens. I'm not saying, I'm pretty sure that happens with the Joe Rogan Experience. I mean, there's people all over the world who listen to that show, and there's good reason for it. It's got a nice flow to it. Joe Rogan's got, a good eye and a good ear for listening and asking questions at the appropriate time. Plus, you get some really interesting motherfuckers on there. I mean, who wouldn't want to have a conversation with Elon Musk? I do. I want him on my show. I would fucking love that. I'd probably die of a heart attack with excitement, but I'd still love it. And he gets to, and a lot of fighters. He had Henry Cejudo on there. He's had conversations with top level guys in the UFC and top level people in their field, and that's even had a paleontologist on there, and that was a very enjoyable segment to me because I was reading Michael Crichton's new book. What is it? I think it's like, I'm gonna remember in like 20, 30 minutes when I'm done with the podcast. But anyways, I was reading his new book about paleontology, about American paleontologists, and this adventure, and it was aptly timed for me to hear that podcast. So he's also had people on there that are deep thinkers who've written books on multitude of subjects that we can only fathom to entertain, and he's very good at getting people on there that are movers and shakers in the world. So, and I would love that. I mean, that's the idea I have for this podcast. That's the idea I have for this show, is to get the movers and shakers in the literary community and people who may not even be at the top or even the pinnacle of their game, or they might even be at the pinnacle of their game. They don't even know about it yet. So I want those authors that are, budding authors. I want those authors that are trying to get out there and they're looking for a way to build their content base and to build their understanding of what the literature and literary community is looking for. Right now, I mean, there's kind of a stagnant way of being in the literature community because major publishers are losing money because smaller publishers are coming in and offering the same things, but they're getting paid by these authors to throw their work out there and get them in the same stores, maybe not as wide, maybe not as far reaching. And of course, to me, it's always the pinnacle of writing success to get picked up by a publisher and sign a contract and get paid that way. But it's also refreshing to hear that there's these indie authors out there that make a fuck ton of money, and they have been rejected so much by the larger publications that they're like, no, fuck it, I'm still getting my book out there. I'm still gonna hire my own illustrator. I'm gonna hire my own editor. I'm gonna publish through a smaller publisher, and I'm still gonna throw it in their face and yield all the profit, or at least yield 70% or whatever it is. So there are authors out there that are throwing in the face of the larger publications and the publishers, and then the publishers. This is what's happened. This happened to a few buddies of mine who are authors, where they indie published, were well received, and then the major publishers swoop in like they were best friends since kindergarten, and it's like, nah, no. The small publishers are like, okay, well, we're gonna flip the script on these guys and give you a contract, and I mean, it's just a cycle of competition that hasn't been there for a long time. Now, there's always been competition in writing. Don't get me wrong. There are people who have been trying to get their novels published and different things published for a long time. And suffice it to say, if you were a writer in the 90s and you didn't get picked up by a major publisher, you're kind of asked out. You didn't know about the smaller publishers. You may not have known about getting published in different mediums. You just fought tooth and nail to get part of a major publisher's ring of authors. Now that's actually not the case. Now you have Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing. You have smaller publishers out there. You have big publishers out there. You have Patreon. You have eBlogger, WordPress. Many different ways to get your story, your content out there. And I would encourage everybody to do that. I mean, if you're working diligently and you're just not picked up by a major publisher, first off, if they're not giving you feedback, it means they just don't have it in their ability at the moment to pick you up as an author and get your content out there, regardless of how good they think your book is. And that's just the sad state of affairs. But if you have trust in your novel, or maybe it's too nuanced for them to really ascertain or understand, or it's like maybe that person who picked up your novel was reading it, had a bad day, and they didn't like the first 10 chapters and didn't give you the proper feedback, well, then they're doing you a disservice. Your editor and your agent should be doing that before you get it to the hands of the major publishers. But if they still, if they're just pulling your leg and jerking you off and not getting you published, then you need to shake things up. Get a new agent, get a new editor. Because if that editor is doing their job and they're doing it correctly, they're not just looking for grammar and spelling, because we have software nowadays that mitigates a lot of that nonsense. What they should be looking for is content, continuity, storycraft, and the following action. A lot of stuff that major publishers are going to look for, and they're going to just see if it's exciting or if it's in fashion. We had a period of time where if you wrote anything zombie, it was market gold, regardless of how shitty or trashy the actual writing was or how simplistic. Now, if your writing's terrible and nobody's giving you that feedback, then honestly, you should get feedback from somebody. I would hire an editor to be as brutally honest about your work as possible and give you proper feedback. Take your novel to a group of readers and a group of writers, have them read it, have them give you proper feedback. There are book clubs, there are writing clubs out there. Become part of that circle, become part of that community, and there's always something that you could be making inches on. And if you're not having success with your novels, park those for a little bit, because your manuscript's done. You can rewrite, re-edit, revise at any point in time on those. Park your manuscripts and then go after the short story. If you can perfect the short story and you have the short story craft down, or even a novella, and that gets more traction, well, then you may have a different angle on what you're trying to do as a writer. Maybe your specialty may be the short story or the novella. Not everybody can craft a good short story. I mean, I've seen major authors, guys who've been picked up, Times bestsellers, not get picked in short story contests because they're used to building, universes, not mountains. If that makes sense to anybody. You have some authors that like building. You have some authors that are like the guys who put the white lines on the road. They have a niche. They have a specific thing that they do, and they're hella good at it. Then you have authors that are, out there. And here's an author nobody thinks about, or a creator nobody thinks about. Stan Lee. This guy was building a universe full of heroes, universe full of villains, and different types of stories and things like that. So if you're thinking on that kind of scale, or you want to, or endeavor to, you have to understand that anything you put down in print has to be building to the overall orchestra what you're trying to achieve. Now, at the time, I'm pretty sure J.K. Rowling wasn't thinking of the entire expanse of what she got to, but at the same time, she left enough breadcrumbs to pick on to the next book, to the next book, to the next book, to the next book. Another person that's very good at doing that, Jeremy Somper, in the UK, talented, young adult literature writer. Gary Paulson was that for me as a kid. He was masterful at penning these really quick young reader novels like Hatchet, the Bryant books, Tuckett's Travels, and you have all these different books that he wrote, like uh, Wolf Song and a couple others. And they were very quick reads. They were action packed. You followed the narrative of one character usually, and then it was done in such a way that it was just well received, by young readers. I remember that was in third grade. We had to read Gary Paulson's Hatchet, and it was just a monumental read for me. It changed my whole landscape of thinking, and I was very much in tune with nature and. Living in Idaho at the time, I was in love with Native American culture, so it was very easy for me to want and desire my own spirit walk or my own test against the elements, and you have that with Hatchet and the Bryant books. It was inadvertent, but and then and then as I was a grown reader, you learn about the Aborigine in Australia who go on walkabout. They take these young men and these teenagers, and they go on walkabout, and they face the elements. They go out there and try and survive. And you go back as far as time will permit. You go back to the ancient Greeks, and they had the Spartans very much had a process where they weeded out the weak from the strong. They had a process where these young Spartans were soldiers in training, so they let them out in nature. They let them out and fought and stole and tried to survive as much as possible within the confines of society and even further. And they were subject to all sorts of manner of horrific things that could have possibly happened. So, and they didn't have the advanced hospitals that we have. So, imagine how many people did not make it, or how many kids did not make it with a fractured arm or a broken leg or a broken ankle or something. They had to figure shit out as they went, and they had to splint it up as best they can to keep trudging despite the pitfalls that befell them. Anybody wants that kind of test. They just may not call for that kind of test readily, but there are some young men and women out there that do that they desire for something like that. But again, going back to my original point, readers are everywhere. Readers will read in all different types of formats. Some people love, like RPG forums, like role-playing game forums, where they read, huge storylines, dialogue, and they respond and interact with the dungeon master, and that to them is their narrative. Well, if you can construct something like that in your WordPress or or whatever, in your blog or whatever have you, and you have this running narrative, people are going to want to follow it. You may not have readership right away, but along the line, somebody's going to pick it up and be like, okay, well, wait a minute, this is awesome. Why hasn't this been picked up and carried? And sometimes when you pick up a book, you find out that author's been writing for years. They have all sorts of other stuff out there, but you just now gravitated to them. You just now got on there enjoying their books. And that happens all the time for me. You have, for me, that was Connie Golden, Simon Scarrow, Michael Curtis Ford. I had no idea these books were out there. I just, found them, and that stupid, smart Amazon algorithm of theirs is just too keen on picking up what you may like, and, lo and behold, you do. So that's just the tail of the tape. And that's one way to find good readership, too, is, have a good outlook on books. Like, if you're done with a book and you're not going to go back to it in a while, or if it's something that's a good one-time read, but you're digging the series, hand it off to a kid, hand it off to an adult, somebody that's going to pick it up and run with it. And if you're an adult and you're in Barnes & Noble and you have these, moms with these bewildered looking, faces like, what am I going to get my kid? I want them to read so badly. They're looking for certain types of books. And it's always good for a parent to get into what your kids are reading. Like, I really wish as a kid I would have had more books like Hatchet, had more books like, I read White Fang, I read Hatchet, I got into Sherlock Holmes. I read things that were just adventurous and, new. I read Where the Red Fern Grows. Uh, let's see. I mean, just a couple of, Red Badger Courage. I mean, there's just so many other books out there that I read as a young adult or a teen that I was in love with. And then, but my parents never asked me. They never. I just kind of had to figure it out on my own. I didn't know I liked Dean Koontz. I wasn't really that readily of a horror reader. I grew up more of the fantasy type kid. I read Dragonlance and I read Terry Goodkind and I read uh, just more adventurous type of books. And then it's very analogous to what I liked in television. I liked space. I mean, what kid doesn't like the concept of space as a kid? I mean, for me, I did not dig the '90s Star Trek until I was an adult. Like I wasn't into it. Like the Next Generation, not a huge fan. I thought it was just mundane, and I wasn't really into it. Just whatever. But as an adult, after I read books like Ender's Game, after you read books like a couple others out there. I mean, I read Communion in sixth grade because I was hugely fascinated with aliens at the time because we used to have a show called in the '90s, called Unsolved Mysteries. And Unsolved Mysteries for me unlocked a whole lot of nuance and interest into what I was reading. And then you had the Goosebump books, and you had Are You Afraid of the Dark? And so I was influenced by so many different types of storytelling format that it's no wonder that I read all these different types of genres as an adult and then get into it. So if you look at my bookshelf, it's a hodgepodge of young adult literature. I've got kids lit. I've got very heady science fiction novels. I've got steampunk books. I've got and I've got a grip of historical fiction. So it's no wonder that I seek those type of stories as an adult because I endeavored to seek them out as a kid. And there was these dumb things as a kid that I remember, like the Sports Illustrated for kids, like that was not interesting to me. Yes, I played sports. I'm very fascinated with sports, but I didn't care about stats. I didn't care about players. It was me that wanted to play. It was me that wanted to get in and play football out there and do stuff. That's what I wanted to do. If I came in and I had to read, I would have loved to have read more of the adventure type books, and I just didn't know how to look for them. Every time we went to the library when I was a kid, in class, I was grabbing books like I was hunting down all the Goosebump books. I read a few of the Hardy Boys. I mean, I didn't really like the format for those because I didn't know where to start, and I wanted to start on book one. But you always know, like all the public school libraries out there that I ever went to had books like, like 10, 14, 20, 16, never in the proper order, because different books are checked out, so there was no getting in the proper sequence or order, and that's what threw me off reading when I was a kid. So I had to hunt down books that I thought were going to be interesting standalone novels, and come to find out I'm reading book two of a series, and it's just it was just upsetting. But as an adult, it was much easier to track down the first book in the series and then just go from there. So just be on the lookout for readers everywhere. Have a couple books in your car if you're a writer. Have a couple of your books in the car. Have them ready to go. Best advice I got from my agent, my publisher, was like, no, have a box of your books in the car. So if you have somebody that's interested in reading and they're a reader and you have that discussion, go make the sale. You got like 50 copies of your books, you might as well profit from them, and you might as well get them in the hands of somebody who is a reader. Now, also at Amazon, not Amazon, but not Blockbuster, it's a wrong type of store. Barnes and Noble or any type of bookstore you walk into, have some titles readily available and match that up with who you're talking to. If you're talking to a kid or if you're talking to an adult who is, the mom or father of a young girl, she's 11, 12, 13 years old looking for some adventure, turn her onto the Bloody Jack series. the Kingdom Keepers. I mean, there's so many books out there that are now yielding a lot of female protagonists that have a lot of powerful female characters. And Diary of a Wimpy Kid is great. A lot, and there's another series that's kind of on the same tack, very analogous. But there are other authors out there that have really shown, came up and shown with, good young female protagonists. Lewis Meyer's Bloody Jack, that was freaking amazing. You see this young female protagonist go from preteen to well into adulthood, and you're like, wow, this is a full transition. This is a full building up of a young lady who's extremely adventurous in the late 17 early 1800s, and it's masterfully done. So, I mean, if you're looking to get into those books, if you're looking for a character to kind of hand your daughter and say you're proud to have done that, that would be that series, the Bloody Jack series, because that series will take all the dangers that young ladies are exposed to, the pursuance of men, the trivialities of society and expectation and things, and it takes all that nonsense and throws it out the door, because the protagonist, Jackie, is non-conventional. She does her own things, and then you're introduced to other women, young ladies on her journey that are extremely powerful, have extreme influence, and achieve very, very great things. So, just dive into that series, and it's great because it also gets into literary heroes and actual historical people, because she meets everybody from presidents to Napoleon to Lord Nelson. I mean, she just meets these wonderful heroes, and it's rewarding to get into those books and meet those great heroes. You even meet Mike Fink. Mike Fink is this I'm one of those Mississippi guys that was these great orators of stories, and they did very well to boost their own selves and ego, and you're going to meet a character like that. So, just dive into the books, there's romance, there's sword fighting, there's piracy. I mean, you meet Jean Lafitte, you meet his brother Pierre, and you're introduced into this world of these wonderful characters in this wonderful time period, and it's great. I mean, and it shows that the power of young women and the agency they actually have to do what they want to in the world without feeling like they should be shunned for it, because Jackie sure as shit does not feel that way. She does not hide her feelings. She cries when she wants to cry. She, is strong in other moments, and I mean, with any character there are vulnerabilities and there are weaknesses, and that's what you love about the dynamic characterization. So, look for the readers out there. If you have people in your workplace that may not even know you've written a book, make it available to them. Say, hey, please check out my book. Here's the link, or hey, I got a copy right here. I mean, right there. Get your book out there, or at least be ready to give a book recommendation, because I have a solid list of books that I can hand off to someone that hopefully will give them satisfaction in that journey of finding a good book. You're like a walking, talking Amazon algorithm, giving them what you would recommend based on what they've discussed with you on what they like. So, I mean, I know they have people who work at Barnes & Noble and work at other bookstores that do that, but even them, I mean, they may only focus on a certain genre, or maybe they're only comic book readers, or they only delve into, more of the genre fiction, or whatever have you. And it's okay to get into the classics too. Now, if someone's a budding reader, you don't want, here's the thing, you don't want to throw somebody into the classics that's really building their reader base. You're going to want to give them something that's quicker, more adventurous, and the vocabulary is a little bit less robust. You want to throw someone into the classics as an adult, which is why I love the fact that they really emphasize on them in college. In college, you're at that academic level and the vocabulary level to sit down and really enjoy Jane Austen or really enjoy. And now I'm not saying that high schoolers can't. I'm not saying that high schoolers won't enjoy, or even middle schoolers won't enjoy Tolkien, uh, or if you're reading C.S. Lewis, or if you're reading whoever you're reading. I'm not saying that you can't or won't enjoy them, but as an adult, once you get into the classics and you read Mark Twain and you read, uh, like I said, Dickens and Jane Austen and Bronte and all these other different literary figures, then it's easier to consume. It's you have a little bit more reading experience behind you, and you're not really going to be held up too much on the shift in vocabulary if that's something you're already familiar with reading, or you're familiar with reading at a high volume already. So you can always tell a person by kind of where they're at in their reading game when you start talking about different books that they have already read. So if someone's telling you, hey, I just knocked down Fahrenheit 451, I read Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Books, I've read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, I've read all these literary classics, so you can already assume that before they ever got to that point, they are already enjoying and loving one series or another. Now, if you run into somebody who says, I am not a reader, I watch movies, I do this, the reason they're that way may have nothing to do with um, the fact that they may not enjoy reading. It's that somebody didn't take the time to give them the proper reading outlet, something enjoyable for them to consume that matches what they have interest in. It's hard to find. If a kid is really into cars, if a kid's really into, being an engineer, or they're really into something that's off the wall, like like ultra physics, it's hard to find a book that matches that kind of interest, or that matches that kind of special wanderlust that they have. There does need to be more authors that concentrates on uh, building cars and racing cars and stuff like that. I can't think. I mean, and I may not know just based on my own frame of reference, but I can't think of an author out there that takes the racing culture, that street racing culture, and puts it on the page, and does a decent job of it. Because any good racer, any good kid, who is into that kind of stuff, picks up and reads that, and if they're able to discern it's bullshit real quick based on their frame of reference, then it's not doing them a service. But I still can't think of an author out there that will take even semi-complex things like car engineering and modifications of vehicles and things like that, and introduce it in a story format for these budding auto mechanics to read and enjoy. Now, auto mechanics are consummate readers. If you don't know and you think auto mechanics are ignorant and you kind of frown and sneer at a mechanic, don't do it. I'm telling you right now, don't do it. Engineers, auto mechanics, people who work with measurements and things, they're not stupid people. They're not even remotely ignorant. So to sneer and say, hey, all you do is turn a wrench all day, that is not at all they do. And if you had the ability to turn that wrench yourself and that know-how, then you would, and you wouldn't take your car to a mechanic if you had that ability to do so and to do it correctly. So one thing I definitely have to say is seek out the reader, and there are readers everywhere. 2, get your stuff on Audible so you can at least get into another medium. And then, of course, look for other outlets of creativity. You can create your own art gallery nowadays. You can create your own and sell your own art on Etsy. There's just so many outlets. If you're a writer, definitely get a WordPress, get a Patreon. Get something that allows you to generate a followship of readers. Definitely hit on all the social media. Now, as a writer myself, I definitely walk away from my social media every once in a while. You have to. You have to unplug embrace nature as it is, and enjoy that as a writer. Just enjoy the scenery, enjoy the vibrancy of the colors, enjoy having a conversation without somebody without checking your phone every 2 seconds. So that's my message for you today. If you have any questions, please, or if you have any submissions to Create a Cast, please send me an email, dwelch9627@gmail.com. I look forward to your submissions. Have a wonderful day and enjoy Create a Cast.